Conservatives are blasting Jake Tapper all over social media right now. That's the reason. He just announced he's releasing a book on the cover-up of former President Biden's cognitive decline.
Tapper tweeted, "Original Sin now available for pre-order at originalsinbook.com from Penguin Press. Been working hard on this with Alex Thompson from interviews with more than 200 White House insiders, Dem leaders, and more. #OriginalSinBook."
Many on the right are pointing to a heated interview that Tapper had with Lara Trump in 2020. Here it is.
Every time he comes on stage or they turn to him, I'm like, Joe, can you get it out? Let's get the words out, Joe. You kind of feel bad for him.
How do you think it makes little kids with stutters feel when they see you make a comment like that?
First and foremost, I had no idea that Joe Biden ever suffered from a stutter. I think what we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable.
You have
to
no.
watch somebody on stage
That's so amazing. It's so amazing to me that
try and figure out an answer.
A cognitive decline.
Well, when you're trying to tell me that what I was suggesting was
I think that you were mocking his stutter. Yeah, I think you were mocking his stutter, and I think you have absolutely no standing to diagnose somebody's cognitive decline. I would think that somebody in the Trump family would be more sensitive to people who do not have medical licenses diagnosing politicians from afar. Plenty of people have diagnosed your father from afar, and I'm sure it offends you. Your father-in-law from afar. I'm sure it offends you. You don't have any standing to say.
I'm not diagnosing him. What I'm saying, Jake,
you just talked about a cognitive decline.
Special envoy for special missions of the United States, Rick Grinnell, tweeted, "Jake Tapper helped cover up Joe Biden's mental state and now pretends like everyone else did it." Political commentator Katie Pavlich said, "Is this a joke?" U.S. Secretary of Veteran Affairs Doug Collins wrote, "Amazing. When you call out Joe Biden's decline for 3 years and say that he should step aside, you get called a conspiracy theorist. But when a CNN reporter finally catches up with reality, they get to sell books and pretend like it never happened." So, from as that clip demonstrated, now that was from 2020, but there was a great reluctance to broach this subject, in my view, from the mainstream media, even as it became increasingly clear that there's something was wrong with Joe Biden. Now, this is a little bit like when Deborah Birx last week, or when I think you were on when we covered that.
She rewrote history.
She was like, I can't believe the people in charge of the COVID response made it sound like it tried to sell the vaccines on preventing cases. That was you.
Right,
you did that. You were in charge of that. And it's a little bit like that here. Now, I am not intensely anti-Jake Tapper or anything like that. I think he's right sometimes, he's wrong sometimes. He does go against some mainstream media groupthink periodically. And, after the debate, he was pretty outraged, as were many others in the media at that point. But the question becomes, when people were raising these issues earlier than that, where were you? And maybe this is going to be a great book on everything that was missed by media outlets, including in some cases CNN. But I know some people will be saying, well, this reporting, it would have been important to do this reporting before the Democrats were in a position where they were just totally screwed and had to replace Biden at the last minute with Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I don't know exactly when he made whatever comments he made, and I hear the point that you're making about how important it is to point out when there are challenges among the top leadership in the world. That said, my mom actually turned 86 yesterday, and I can tell you from experience that as age continues, the jumps in terms of cognitive decline can happen pretty dramatically. So if it was early on when he was saying it, I didn't obviously work directly for the president, but obviously served very proudly in that administration. And the stories I recall, especially from early on in the administration, were very senior members of the administration being terrified about being in the room with the president because he was very sharp and actually often asked them really tough questions that maybe they weren't prepared for. So I do think the timing comes into play here.
Yeah, we don't know exactly when it set in. Maybe this book will help shed some light on that. But there has subsequently been reporting. We heard all along that, oh yeah, he's so sharp, he asks tough questions. I heard that too.
Yeah.
But then there was subsequent reporting about, well, we try not to schedule meetings early in the morning or late at night, that he has his window where he's really sharp and really on it, that we don't want to subject him to meetings that go on too long because then his mind wanders. I don't know exactly when that started or when that started getting worse, or that he was hard to get a hold of. you're right, the decline can be very dramatic. We've all had the experience of elderly relatives, neighbors, friends, etc., being of that age and being mostly fine, and then all of a sudden, they're not mostly fine anymore. It can happen overnight.
Exactly.
So we don't know when that occurred. Of course, that was always a risk of having this, the oldest person ever,
and it's a risk
higher
right
office.
now, obviously. I mean, this is a very, very timely conversation because, as viewers know, Donald Trump is now the oldest person to have ever been elected president of the United States. And if we're going to look at Joe Biden and any sort of changes that happened to him over the term of his service, we should also, I think, be looking very closely at what may or may not happen.
Don't you think some people will just say that conversation is that's just off the table, given how the Biden thing was covered up and ignored? And then he continued to be the president for months, even after the point at which we all admitted there was something wrong, after the debate, right? He dropped out of running for re-election, but he remained the president for the next several months. I don't know. I thought that was the whole part of the 28th Amendment, to have the cabinet decide the president's no longer fit, 27th, excuse me, fit to do 20, they're saying 25, one of those numbers, to replace, to have the cabinet say the president is not capable of doing the job. I know there were conversations about that when Trump was president the first time. Mainstream media was talking about, is his rhetoric evidence that he's crazy, and could we have the cabinet invoke the amendment? It was interesting that there was no conversation about that after Biden was demonstrably in decline.
Well, if your question is, should it be taken off the table, I think the answer is no. I think we should be looking closely at who is sitting behind the Resolute desk, and are they sharp, and how are they performing in the most critical role in the country. I do think that it varies from person to person. Bernie Sanders, for example, I think is another person who is advanced in age but is incredibly sharp. So it really depends on the person.
It's the 25th Amendment. I just looked it up.
He was driving you nuts.
Yeah. I misspoke. All right. Thanks so much for watching. More Rising right after this.